I could sit here and say that, you're guaranteed your money back, blah, blah, blah. But, it's not honest. It's a risky business. You can be incredibly successful, and you can not be incredibly successful. You can lose money.
In the room, 52 Jokers Wild.
Welcome, everybody. It's another Friday in the room with Garvin and George. And this week, our guest is James Webber, who is a writer-director at the Springhead Film Company. He's also a writer-director in his own right, doing commercial films and things, commercials, music videos and the likes of. And he's also produced his first feature film, and I'm going to get this right now, Sorority. If you'd like to tell us about your sorority and why people get it wrong so often.
It is a strange thing. I mean, a lot of people have thought it's called sobriety, which I don't know. It's not called that at all. Maybe that says more about them. I don't know. But the usual thing is that people, when they find out it's called Sorority, assume it's a horror film for some reason, which, I mean, it couldn't be further from being a horror film than possible. But it's an interesting thing, and it's something that sort of a lot of the people who worked on the film, we've sort of discussed. And I guess we kind of wanted to reclaim the word, because if you think about it, like, a sisterhood, women together, automatically conjuring, someone would think it's a horror film. It's kind of bizarre. So we sort of wanted to reclaim it and sort of spin it, I guess, in a more positive.
Now, I haven't seen the film, James. I haven't seen the film, but it sounds like a bunch of women are getting together, and there's no men, and they're planning and they're doing stuff, and they're keeping us on the outside. Therefore, you're telling me it's not a horror. A bunch of women in a room, keeping the men away, planning stuff. They're the friends, we're the enemies. You go, maybe it is a horror. And actually, they might be sober, but our sobriety has gone out the window with the worry.
No, it's not like that at all. No, it's, it is predominantly kind of a female led, certainly from the acting. There's only really one male character in the whole film. But, it was something when I started making the film, I never really thought, because, I wrote the script as well as directed it. I didn't want to it to be like a gimmick. I didn't set out for it to be like that. I just wrote about characters and they just happened to be female.
I'm going to ask, well, actually, that's an interesting thing, because when you look at the various film boards and screen skills in both the UK and Ireland, and actually further afield and abroad, there's this whole subject matter of addressing gender imbalance. And actually, they're looking to promote screenwriter, producer, director, female, and more female-led cast and more female-led crew. Now, here's three men sitting in virtual rooms talking about an all-women film, effectively, yet you're not the female producer or director. Or you weren't, it wasn't even a female writer. Was it that this was actually a call-out from the industry to write something under this heading, and you stepped up, or you actually just found yourself writing on this subject matter, and it just happens to meet the industry ask?
I would never write something for a quota, or, a lot of my films have been, with female leads, and that's not, a gimmick. It's not something I thought, I can get more funding if I do it this way. It's just the way it is, and I was sort of doing it before, I guess it became, I don't know, fashionable.
It's story-led,
which
is great.
Yeah, precisely. I mean, Sorority for me is like a really personal film. A lot of it I grew up in a household of women. When I was younger, I lived in a house with, for many years, with my mum, my grandmother, and my great-grandmother. And my father wasn't in the picture. And I sort of grew up in this really interesting household with many generations of women from the same family. And I remember the way they talked to each other and the way that they all saw life differently. And I think it had a very kind of profound effect on my work. You know, they were funny, they didn't take any nonsense. You know, they could be frustrating sometimes, they could be warm, very funny, and such characters. And there's that in Sorority. That's although most of the story is fictional to a degree, there's still quite a big influence of sort of my childhood and sort of growing up in that house and watching things unfold.
What I'm hearing now is, like, again, coming from business, we're always saying we want more. We want to break the glass ceiling. We had a couple of guests on which were under that heading, and more powerful women in business, or even respect or equalization of pay or getting bigger promotions. But at the end of the day, in my eyes, and you sort of touched on in the one sentence there's 3 generations of the decision makers. There's 3 generations of the real workers and not being paid, or maybe being paid, maybe not going out to business. But probably if there's no men around, that actually says the same thing again. It says they were not only doing the homework, they were doing the work, because there's no man to be seen. They're the decision makers. They're actually the puppet masters. They're the ones that empowered you and the likes of me. You know, I think I'm a strong man, but I know my mother made me who I am. Okay, my father was there, but she was the boss. You know, she made the decisions, and she empowered us to have a good lifestyle or go out there and educate ourselves. So, you know, I do believe we may be 3 men in a room, but we know who the bosses are. We know who the real decision makers are. And ultimately, there's more respect needs to be given in film and have that reflected, I think. Yeah.
So you just inspired a little story from my own sort of childhood, where I remember being in the back of the car as a kid, and my dad was sort of saying, okay, you want to go for a drive? Let's go for a drive. And we come to a T-junction. It was a case of, he'd say to his wife, my mum, which way would you like to go? Well, you make the decision. That's your choice. So you kind of go, all right, I'll go left. And he'd suddenly realized he'd made a mistake and had to turn the car and go the other way, because she was the one. She wasn't making decisions. It looked as though she was giving him his place, but she made the final decision of what they were going to do and how they were going to do it, which I think is interesting, you know. And I think that's what happens in most households, actually, even the household at home. I had my wife was there. I had my 2 sons, but it took me and my 2 sons to be able to sort of match up to my wife, and I don't even think we did then. And then now we've actually got my mum living with us as well, so it's all I've kind of been back into that experience. So I think it is fascinating just sort of seeing the psychology of that. And is that the kind of thing that kind of inspires your kind of filmmaking, that you're looking at the psychology of family structures and things like that? Or have you other themes that you're interested in that you're hoping to explore in your next project?
I've got quite a wide cinematic taste. A lot of my, short films and my first feature are dramas and sort of deal with, I guess, everyday issues. But I watch all kinds of films. I don't just watch those kinds of films. I'll watch, I'm a big horror fan. I'll watch something that's painfully bad and painfully cheesy and completely enjoy it, and then I'll go and watch a black and white Russian film from the 1950s. Like if you were around my house and you look at my Blu-ray collection, it's eclectic. And I think it sort of goes back to something that always stuck with me, which a lecturer said back when I was studying film. And that was to watch everything. Yeah. Soak everything up. I think he used a Mexican game show as an example. Maybe I didn't go that far, but just watch as much stuff as possible. And actually, after studying, I got a job in, and I know how this sounds. It makes me the ultimate kind of walking cliche as a filmmaker. But I went and worked in Blockbuster for a number of years, and. Watched more films than you could possibly imagine.
I can imagine a lot, and I've watched more. I actually worked in a place in London called VideoServe that actually delivered in the videos to Blockbuster.
Yeah.
So the strange thing is, and our extra bonus, my student friends, was you got to bring some videos home for free at night. So we'd put in a 10-hour day in a day, and we'd do 6 to 8 hours of back-to-back video at night for about 3 months. So I think we actually looked like The Walking Dead by the end of it, but we were, and it was actually in the Betamax era. So it was, we had a Betamax video recorder, and they were moving from Betamax to VHS at the time. So unfortunately, we could only afford the Betamax video, and our choice was then limited on which ones were now being made versus the back catalogue versus the new catalogue. But it was probably my first introduction to all the various names of the various production houses releasing the movies, because you've got to do your typing in your data input very fast, because you'll recognize the little eagle or the something else, and you're already halfway through the code, and you knew that was going to be a horror, this is going to be a comedy, they do this type of work, they do that type of work. So I think that's probably still reflected to this day. They have their, most production houses might actually err, would you think, on, if we're a horror production house, we know our market. We know what we do all day long. This is what we do. Now, what was interesting about what you were saying was your background could have been from drama to from horror to cheat. So a cheesy horror would actually be something very, very attractive to the end audience. And maybe the drama might have a harder audience. But the great thing you said was, you've made the film, you've raised the finance, you made your passion someone else's, or enough of it to actually attract the money to get it made. How difficult was that? Was it a big or small budget? That journey is very, very important to an awful lot of individuals out there to get to that first feature.
Well, just before we go there, because one of the things I just wanted to sort of bring up, because I know that you're dealing with people in the Springhead Film Company, because we do want to go into what Garvin's just talking about, but because we're at this little place here, I know from teaching a lot of students that one of the biggest problems was they weren't watching anything over the 5 years old, and they wouldn't even watch a black and white movie. And if you then introduce them to the black and white, like 12 Angry Men, the initial reaction to the students was that they would basically sigh and get really frustrated. And then straight away afterwards, as they watched it, they went, "Oh my God, that was an amazing movie." And because they haven't had a chance to experience that, they're losing a lot of filmmaking techniques, especially the ones that Garvin and I want to start using in the films that we're doing now, because they're just so used to Hollywood, blockbuster, special effects, CGI, that they think they have to replicate those. And they're missing out on such a massive part of the education of how to make, stories that can be appealing to a general audience. Do you find that with the people that you're working with in Springhead?
Well, Springhead's my company, so it's it was kind of set up to I guess make the kind of films that I wanted to make and the stories I wanted to explore. I mean, I do work outside of the company as well. I'm not completely tied to it, but I mean, and we've done all kinds of stuff, in our short films before we sort of went into our feature. There was a lot of urban dramas. There was, a very silly horror short we did that did really well. And it was all kinds of things, but I think the mission statement, because it was myself and my wife that set up the company, was to, assemble a bunch of like-minded filmmakers across the board, DOPs, sound design, you name it, almost like create a film family where we all, enjoy each other's work as much as each other's company, because I think that does kind of reflect in the films as well. If you're enjoying yourself making it, that can translate quite well onto the screen as well. If you have a terrible time doing something, then it's that can be part of the DNA of the film as well. And I've been quite lucky to all the films we've made have been just really great experiences. So that it was really just set up as a way to sort of progress and sort of make the films that interested us. And I mean, I'd love to sort of work with other directors within the company as well, which we have a little bit, but I think that's probably.
And were those films budgeted, or did you find a different way to budget those films? How did you budget those films?
When it came to the shorts, I used to fund a lot of films myself, and that was good. And I made a lot of shorts that way, and with small budgets, and get some actors and some people who want to get some footage, and but you end up sort of cutting the legs off your story because you're trying to I would watch stuff back, and it would be like, am I happy with it? Did I do everything I could to make it as good as possible? No, it's like the guerrilla filmmaking route, which I still sort of consider myself to be a guerrilla filmmaker, but back then I was super guerrilla. And I reached a point and I was like, I'm not going to do that again. And I had a good opportunity to produce like a well-budgeted film that a friend was directing, and I was working with her husband, who's quite an established filmmaker. It was a real eye-opener for me. We had like named talent in it, and it was it was crowdfunded, and they hit the money within like less than a day because of who her husband was, and And it just gave an opportunity to sort of do things a different way.
Again, the accountant in me it keeps on coming back up. And it's like we do talk on the ambiguous, but at the same time, well-funded. And it was crowd-funded, and it hit the targets in a day, which is nearly unheard of. So what was the target? What sort of funding level are we talking here? Is it in the millions? Is it smaller?
No, it was a short film. It was a short film. So I think the initial budget was, I think it was about $8,000 they were asking for, but it made something like, because this was a few years ago now, so I'm struggling to remember. I would imagine it was between 15 and 20.
But there's an interesting thing in my language. See, if we come from no budget to 5 and 10, we had this come up in another one of our like shows there quite recently. If you're coming from nothing, something is amazing. It's $10,000. God forbid, we've eked 10 grand together. We can do 10 minutes or 15 minutes of something. It's brilliant. But then when you move I was using the example of the fives. We've got 5 grand. We can do 5 minutes of something. We've got 50 grand. We can make an awful lot of something else. But how you get 50 grand when you've run out of family and friends is getting harder. Now, if we've 500 grand, we've 40 cast and crew running around in a micro budget level of meaningfulness, because the amount of people we need at the day rate to deliver to something is everybody has to get paid. There's no escaping 500 grand. So now and that's the language we were trying to come from. We were talking to Jonathan Bromley, like a very well established producer, director, actor in America. His language was working from 500 million backwards. He was nearly going, sure, geez, now, you want 500 grand? Well, here's a cup of tea and there's a couple of quid. He says it doesn't even enter into their conversations. He calls that nearly microscopic budget. That anything under 5 million in the LA language is, that's a hobby. Well, good luck with that. But, it's not, we're in the movies here. Now we're working backwards and going, if we're coming and we want to be the writer, producer, director, we're coming from nothing to be the risk on someone else's budget. So, and that's where I was nearly hoping you were going to say, well budgeted, and I heard $8,000, I was going, geez, I'll give you that now. That wouldn't be well budgeted in any book. In my book, the accountant has come back into the role here. No, it's not the accountant. It's the in the room, the business of film. And instead of the film business, we're in the business of film, everyone here, because we're starting to talk the language of budget. And what can we do? And whether the budget drives the film or the film drives the budget. But either which way you look at it, the money has to be in the room. And as soon as you have the money in the room, the money leaves, and then the art and creativity can try to be packaged with the skill sets that are there. But the question I want to ask James is, I don't know what the level of pitch that Sorority is. It's a feature film. It's got some names in it, a good team, a breakout feature. But at what level of budget raise was that, I suppose, as a starting point, so we can get a frame, how difficult it was, or what it has to do in the marketplace to get its money back, or who it attracted beyond its ability of a figure, if that makes sense.
The budget was just under 100K, so it's a small budget, budgeted production, but it was really written to be that way. So I basically had, as I'm writing the script, I had the budget in my head already of kind of where I wanted it to sit. I wrote it for favors I could call in, locations I had access to. I had actors in mind that I could reach out to. In fact, I already had spoken to Sophie Kennedy Clark, who is one of the leads in the film. She won a BAFTA for playing young Judi Dench in Philomena, but she's been in some incredible films with some of the world's best filmmakers. And I'd met her through working on another project, which got quite close to happening, but didn't happen. And we used to meet and sort of bang our heads against the wall about it. And then I can't remember who suggested it first, but she was like, let's just make our own film. And I was like, okay, well, give me a moment to think about that, and I'll come back to you. And yeah, we got back in touch. I was like, here's the script. And it's based on a short film that I had previously made. So, the visual language and the way the film felt and the way it sort of played had already been established kind of 5 years previous. She came on board not only as lead, but also as one of the producers. And we started making the film together, and she'd worked with Kate Dickie, who's another one of the wonderful actors in the film, probably best known for Game of Thrones. And I'd worked with Kate on the short film version of the feature, which was called Soror. I just added the little bit on the end to make it Sorority, going for the aliens wide, it's a bit bigger. It was easy to sort of get those guys on board and sort of sign up to this experience.
During your film production process, I mean, one of the things I'm quite interested in is there was a number of short films that I worked on a few years ago, and at least two of the films were properly processed in working out schedules and things, and they worked really well. But there's one film didn't, and it ended up almost a horror story because people that had sort of lent locations were annoyed that they couldn't get back in when they were expecting to, because they hadn't planned how to do the shoot. How much detail do you go into in a daily shoot, or is that possible on your kind of filmmaking?
It's completely possible. Forensic detail. I'm hugely passionate about pre-production. I think it's probably, every stage of production is important, but if you have bad pre-production, then the shoot's going to be challenging, post's going to be an issue. It filters the whole way down. You get that right, and at least you start on the best possible footing, because there will always be wild cards during a shoot. Yeah. With good pre-production, you can foresee a lot of that and have things in place. So to tell you the truth, the way that we produce the feature is no different than we produced the way we produce short films. And actually, the amount of work to a degree is quite similar. It's just different amounts of money, and you book in people for longer periods of time. I think the short film version of Sorority, called Soror, actually had more locations than the feature. yeah, so I had to source less for the feature film version. Yeah, you're just talking about raising more finance, and obviously things on the end to do with sales and distribution is a whole kind of new world for me. Although we have always had distribution for our shorts, like Shorts International have two of my short films, and they put out a lot of the Oscar-winning shorts. And we actually pre-sold my horror short, The Prey, to like a LA-based company that's a subsidiary of Blumhouse. So yeah, that was kind of fun, like pre-selling a short, which
that's unheard of, nearly now. Yeah. I mean, you're actually I'm very, very impressed. Now, I don't know when that was, and it was repeated many a time after, but for anyone else out there that we're dealing with, they're nearly seeing the shorts as, we're hoping to win an award, but we don't have any marketing even to get to the festival because we only raised $2,000 in the first place to eke the short to begin with, or it might be $20,000 if it's a funded short in the Irish market, and it has a chance of getting something. But it was never really looking as if there was a pre-sale language, a marketing language, or making its money back. It was just, we got to make it. You literally said, we pre-sold a short. You're going, you had your money back. Actually, with the $100,000 feature, even though you said the budget was 100, I was hearing in your language, it was a little bit more than that. I don't know how much of the pre-post work
it was less than 100. It was probably close to 90.
Yeah. No, that's a physical cash, baby. I'm wondering, did you charge every penny of your pre-post effort of scheduling that you put in of your baby into that budget?
Oh, of course not.
Well, then I'm going, you have to, as an accountant,
but if it was a million.
Now you go. That's it.
Yeah.
There you go. So realistically, if a third party somebody had to hire in the pre-post expertise to guarantee that went smoothly, and it wasn't them because they were the writer but not the scheduler, then how incremental would the budget be moving? You had some great favors you were able to, over 10 years, bring in. But now you have a BAFTA winning so-and-so and a Game of Thrones other. Had they charged it a day rate and not been the producer, would that have doubled the budget to have the same actresses there? For the third party doesn't have the relationship. So, I mean, this is what other people have to do in the absence of the relationship. You had the triptych. You had a pre-sale short you can leverage into the future on a feature. You had relationships of BAFTA to award-winning something that would do a favor and want to be involved and give back. And you managed to raise $100,000, and actually, now we know the price was more, but because the value is beyond the 100. I think, if I had to do it, what would it cost me to do it, do you think?
Well, in that process, I mean, one of the things that I know that I did with my feature, again, we didn't raise the money, but we managed to get £300,000 worth. And effectively, I'd kind of followed a procedure similar to what Garvin's talking about, because I broke the film down into its component parts and worked out every single bit, and then worked out what people were able to give us to bring that budget down. But in one sense, there was still an agreement with that party or third party that if the film did make some money, we would have to take a percentage to them. Would you have to work in those kind of deals with those people that if the film did make money, they didn't come back to you and suddenly say, well, you remember when we helped you out with that movie, you've made a lot of money, can we now ask for some money back in return?
As far as like services and people, like we paid, we worked out a deal and the deal was the deal. And yeah, like I had, because we'd always, use really good post and certainly post services, good graders, an amazing sound designer who has his own studio. A lot of those guys actually wanted to be involved with the feature and actually help us out. And it wasn't a case of, here's some money, but if it does well, I'll want more money. And it was quite a simple sort of deal, and they gave us what available time they had, and we worked to that schedule. And sometimes that means the post might take 1 or 2 months, a little bit longer than it would do normally. But for the right people, it's it's worth delaying things and sort of waiting for them to come on board and to work to their schedules.
I think what's important is that's really good, because basically there are parameters being set so that everybody knows and understands the processes that you're going through and what the consequences of those processes are. So I think that's really good. I know a lot of the filmmakers that we're talking to haven't even thought of that, and they think they're making deals, but they haven't actually got it in writing. So there's no parameters set, and then they get hit with something years later because they hadn't thought. But I think it's really important what you're saying here, that you have established the boundaries, what can be given and how much it is for. So you've set a kind of price, even though you've worked out a deal. And I think that's really, really good that we're hearing that, because I think that's the kind of things that filmmakers that we're hopefully going to be working with need to understand, because without that you can't move your film forward into distribution.
All of this was talked about as well before we really went into production, before pre-production really. I shared the script with sort of the core team. The same, I used the same cinematographer, for instance, for years. I worked with other people, but he made the short with me. We've done a lot of other stuff, and we sort of know each other really well. That when I've written a script, I'll send it to him and say, "What do you think?" And he'll start having ideas, and then he's attached to it, and he knows maybe it's not going to be as big a money earner as shooting a commercial or something for a big brand, but he will be artistically rewarded through it, and also he's got a lot of work from the short film version. He Lorenzo, cinematographer I worked with for years, he refers to it as the gift that keeps giving, which is wonderful to hear. So sort of making the feature with him is sort of a no-brainer. And most of the people who worked on the film were people I'd collaborated with before. And it's, once again, going back to the shorts, it's you get to find your film family and people you enjoy working with, who do good work. They're on the same wavelength as you. Not saying that you don't occasionally have differences of opinion on how to approach certain things, but that's good. You need people around you that you trust, but also aren't afraid to, question.
You don't want yes men and yes women. Yeah. It's a case of the difference. Yeah. It's to find that halfway house that actually brings the extra value. Otherwise, we're all singing off the same hymn sheet. We're all singing the same hymn, but there's no outside. You're not going to break the mold. So, I love what the language you're using there, because it's actually a language that resonates with us. If we're saying we're talking the business of film, I actually would nearly rename that now to be the family business of film, because we're looking for that go-to team that basically gets it, that you get each other, you're allowed your voice, you find a compromise, but the compromise is around bringing extra value to the center. And therefore, that's brilliant. And you don't need to go any further to find someone else, because that's what the journey of your relationships were about in the first place. It's finding that go-to team that gets it, that wants to keep on getting it. And again, you've resonated with the fact that your story, Sorority, or the breakout feature, it's something that's going to keep on giving. It's a testimonial platform. It shows the family and the fun we had, the fact we enjoyed it. It's evidenced in the film, in how it gets delivered, because somewhere in there the art will translate. And you've said that. I think we actually have been speaking about that on an awful lot of our shows, and that's what we want. We don't want to go off and make the big film, because that's 500 people and lots of moving parts. If we can get the level of what you're talking about, it's the family business of film, this film family. And I think that's where we're going, and that's what I see in what you're talking about at the moment, which is great.
Yeah, a lot of people that we've been talking to, and I've probably fallen foul of this myself, is that because the resources around you are limited, you end up trying to do everything yourself. And I think what's really, really good coming from what you're saying, James, is the fact that, you had a cinematographer, you had an editor, you had all these other components that you worked with, and it was a collaboration. And I think that's really important, because that motivates you to keep on working and keep on going. Whereas I know that in the past, on a couple of the projects I've had, because all the responsibility was me, you end up running out of steam, and you haven't got somebody else to actually give you that boost. And that's one of the reasons why I'm working with Garvin, is because, when we do individually get that low, you've got somebody else to counter that and boost you back up again. Is that something you found within the productions that you were working on?
Oh, 100%. It's more enjoyable sort of going through the experience with others as well. And you get in a room and you're throwing ideas around, and I love collaboration. I think it's a collaborative art form. So it's so important. And there were certain things on the feature, for instance, I do edit, and I do, I get paid to edit. But I decided not to edit on the feature because I had a worrying feeling that, I could start, obsessing and taking longer, and I needed someone to do a cut without my involvement, take the footage and do their interpretation of what the film was, and then I would join them and we'd work on it together. And that was a much, I think, better and healthier way of proceeding, because that person has no idea how long it took to get a shot, no idea of all the planning that went into certain moments, or the rehearsals we did to an inch of their life just to get this one moment on camera. They will see it almost from an audience point of view.
Yeah.
And approach it that way. And that was really beneficial. We got a wonderful editor who I'd met through, I was on BAFTA crew scheme, and I met her at drinks thing. She just kind of just appeared out of the darkness and started talking to me and saying if I ever needed an editor. And we met for a coffee a few weeks later, and she's fantastic. Monica Redwanska. I think she's, it'd be embarrassing if she watches this, but I think she's going to be a massive.
We need one more customer, James. You're going to have to get her to watch this, otherwise we'll have no audience.
Absolutely.
But she's great, and she's worked on Star Wars and large, in the editorial department of large productions, to sort of have a smaller film where she can put her stamp on it.
Yes,
and make it her own. A lot of people were coming to the film from in that way as well. They'd sort of been in a bigger productions where actually
they're invisible. The weird thing is, we had a little preamble before this show and said what we're about, and what actually was very nice of what you said, because I've actually said that to George as well. It's like, we are experts. I can wash windows, but I'm not meant to be washing windows. I can be the accountant, but I'm no longer the accountant. I want to be in the room. I know what right looks like. You said, because you're an editor, you know the functionality of it. Now, we can do it, but you've stepped out of that role now, but you know what your replacement needs to functionally look like as a skill set, and you also recognize what the art was beyond the functional. So, I mean,
but also, like, editing goes beyond editing. It's a major part of direction.
Yeah.
Something else that saves time, it saves money, is shooting to edit.
Yeah.
So a whole sequence will be shot, so it'll be edited in a particular way. And once again, that's a short film. I did a short film called Driftwood, which is very precise. It's almost like 3 micro shorts combined into one, and the stories run visually into each other, and you have to have an idea of the timing and the sense of edit as you're shooting it, or you're going to run into trouble.
Now, James, what I am sitting in the room with is 2 editors, which is a rare, actually, and we've actually had another editor in the room before as well. And the great thing is, I think this is very, very important. In indie production, the people are having the difficulty they're trying to go, give me 200,000 and I'll spend it. Give me if I can have more and I'll spend it. And we're going, no, they're not coming from the other side. Even Carl King said it, like the film Joyride, the particular makers of it, they were editors to begin with that then decided we can affect what will end up here in front of us, because we know what we can write for the ask to be what we expect to edit. So we're coming from the functional backwards. And as you said, we're writing the film with the budget in mind. You're nearly saying we're writing with the edit in mind. And now we're saying this is the budget we need to get the minimum mask of value for edit, for function, for value. Well,
let me bring something in there because, what Garvin's talking about is the way that I've worked all my life. It turns out the two of us, James, went to Bournemouth. Now, I went to Bournemouth Film School. You went to, was it Wallasdown College, the university?
The Arts Institute, yeah.
The Art Institute there,
it's
yeah.
Anymore, I don't know.
Now, hang on. So you went to the Arts Institute. Is that the one? Right, now, what's interesting, I think it used to be the college that used to be in Lansdowne that went to Wallasdown after the university was set up. So that's the art school. So you actually went to the same place I went, even though it changed locations. But one of the things that I had coming from that course was that although we directed our own short films, we were basically told what jobs we should be looking for in the industry. And for me, I was directed towards becoming an editor. I was told basically very early on, look, you're an editor because the way that you look at things and the way you sort of scan things out. And I know that from a directing perspective, that's what I've been doing all my life. Everything I'm doing is how can I cut that together? Even in the middle of this show, there was a question that Garvin started to ask, and I edited it in two and went, right, I'm going to inject that, and I'm going to move this around to here, and that will make that clearer, what we're trying to get to. So I've just edited the piece in my head as I'm going along. And I think that's something that is missing from a lot of people, because early on in my career, I'm a non-linear editor. So I see the whole film, and I can work on this section here and not worry about the rest because I've got an overview. But I've worked with a lot of directors that had to go in a very linear way. And I'm not sure if it's because they were involved in video editing before, but they couldn't cope with how do you see the whole film? And they were the director producers. And that was very frustrating from my perspective, because I know in some of the projects I've worked on, because they didn't understand where we were going, I had no concept of whether we were close to the end of the film or in the middle of the film. And I could see budgetary wise that I was running out of time to do the edit. And that is a major, major problem that we have, because we're going back to the accountancy idea, that if the director and producer don't understand the editing process, they don't know how much time it's going to take to get something done. And my experience has been that most people get it wrong by, they underestimate by about a third. And they think it's going to take a certain amount of time, and it's usually 3 times longer. Is that the kind of experience that you've had from working with clients and things? Because it is a budgetary thing that is always causing problems.
I think sort of working certainly like corporate and things like that, where I really sort of cut my teeth when I first went full time as a creative. Like you have all kinds of experiences in the edit, and some of them are very pleasant and simple and aligned, and sometimes you have clients who don't necessarily understand the process at all. Which is why they've asked you to do it and they're not doing it themselves. Good for me. But it can complicate things, and they can sometimes have new ideas in the edit as well, which are really part of the shoot. You can't do that in the edit. You need to. I remember someone asking if I could pan the camera once in an edit. Could we just move it more onto him? And I was like, well, that's impossible.
Yeah,
that's physically impossible.
It's not impossible. It's not like
James. Blade
we can
Runner
go
with
back
that
in
weird
time.
Camera thing, that moves around. It's and you sort of explain it to the person, and the penny drops. That kind of technology is quite a way off. So it's interesting, occasionally painful, but mostly fine.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm going to swing back around to Sorority, only in the context of, I know, everyone else and all the other shows you're on, you'll be talking about what the film's about and this, that, and the other, and like it's just drama and that love affair or someone gets murdered. We don't care. We're in the business of film. At the moment, you've done the impossible. You've raised finance. You've done a second impossible. You've attracted beyond the budget, and you've got some names in there. I don't know whether you mentioned or not that. Did you get a pre-sale on this one because of the pre-sale in the past, or are you because these people are in there now and it's done and dusted, you're on that journey.
Yeah, there was no pre-sale on this at all. We literally got independent finance from a businessman who paid for the entire film. And actually, having sort of come from a feature before, that, you know, it was difficult raising the finance. Admittedly, it was a much larger budgeted film. But with this one, the first person we met said, yeah, I'm interested. I'll pay for the whole thing. And I was kind of like,
hold on, where are you having coffee? Go back a sentence there. The first person you met, so just put his hand in his pocket, took out $100,000 and go, yeah, that's fine, that's grand. Was that Conor McGregor? Yeah. Were you at an MMA fight or something there?
No, not at all. It wasn't someone who was even involved in film.
Right, brilliant, James.
It wasn't even a previous contact of mine. It was brought in through one of the other producers.
You've done another triptych. You've done an unheard of. You've attracted a non-film investor to film on a first-time basis with a six-figure, or I don't know many, I think, there's probably six figures in 100. Six-figure, one check, not 200 little guys giving a tenner each. No, you've got the first ask. And if you don't, if this actually does okay, you've opened the door to the unheard of impossible in indie production that's currently in the Irish and UK market. An unknown investor willing to cut a six-figure check based on what brought them over. Were they bought into the names where there was no preconditions by the sounds of this. It was just
we went for a lot of dinners. Which, to be fair, he paid for.
Right, was this McDonald's now, or are we hanging out in the Ritz?
No, it was good. It was, we had a number of very nice Indian meals, we met a number of times. We talked about the film. Like, he had a lot to, he was very committed to financing the project, but I think we wanted to make sure he understood what that meant and talk him through the way that we wanted to make the film. Yeah. Like, it's not like you make the film and then bang, we just hand it over to someone and it starts bringing in money. It's not quite as simple as that, we wanted to do the festival route, which is effectively delaying a return. And he gave us, and I also didn't want anyone who was going to sort of have opinions on the story. James,
you're painting an impossible picture for everybody else here. They got to find your investor. This person that goes, be damned the risk. You've got carte blanche. Don't worry about how many years it takes to get the money back. I'm not really pushed. You're going, I'm going to step back in as the investor type question and go, what would a normal investor, that 100 now, what is it that's on offer? When would he expect the money back? Okay, we know the 100's at risk. It has to get 100 back just to break even. At inflation and all the rest of it, it's over 5 years. He spent 25% just to keep up in inflation over 5 years. So how many customer views in the old YouTube-y, googly space do you think you're going to need to give this investor a little bit of a return over 5 years?
No idea. I mean, there are so many different ways that the film could go. There are so many, avenues that are open to us to do that. So and that's the point where we're at now.
But now, is there a budget? There's the big mad question. The film was made for 90 grand. What's the marketing budget?
Marketing is in a festival sense.
No, I mean, for you to get the sales and all these relationships and go to as many festivals as you want.
Wait, you're basically looking for a distributor. Is that what it is through the festival?
Yeah, like a sales agent. Yeah. So nothing. It's just emailing people
based on that same premise of the film festival routes. One of the things that we've been hearing from people that have got stuff into distribution is that the distributor ends up getting a big whack of the money that the returns, and quite often the producers end up with next to nothing to give their investors a return. Is your investor aware of that as well, or are they?
it's difficult to sort of talk, and I don't want to get into specifics about.
No specifics. No.
Yeah, I mean, we've film is. I think I did say to him, I could sit here and say that, you're guaranteed your money back, blah blah blah, but that's not. It's not honest. It's a risky business. You can be incredibly successful, and you can not be incredibly successful. You can lose money. So, don't put it. He luckily, I don't think we were in the position where finance wasn't going in that. Was
it's not.
He knew the risk as a business.
Yeah.
Right. No, because in a few of the interviews we're having lately, we've got some people at the lower level and they're going the OTT platform route. And even with their couple of films on the OTT platform, they're unclear themselves as to what they'll actually get. So, I as an accountant couldn't help myself saying, okay, if you put it onto YouTube in the normal sense, it's 7 cents for 1,000 views, 700 grand. It's going to take you 70 million customers, and that's number 3 on Netflix. Actually, when we looked at the Netflix side of things, and because they've removed the upside, they more than likely would just buy the production out with a 30%. So 100 grand, they'll give you 130% of all your costs. Now, what the other conversation said was, if you didn't cost in the full cost of production, had you put in your time at the right time, they would have gave you 200 grand, because it was a recognised invoice of cost reduction, not the work given for nothing. So it's not in your interest not to actually pay yourself or invoice it in if Netflix or Amazon are one of the outs. So now it turns out we looked at the Netflix model and we thought they would be giving us more per view. It turns out you probably get less than Google. You might be getting 4 to 5 cents a view in the sense of, for your 100 grand, using the maths, you need 2 million views under either or heading of customers for you to get the money back. And it's not...
It's difficult as well, though, isn't it? Because Netflix very rarely sort of give out viewing figures. So it's
what's happened is they've now they've took control of the market. They no longer give you access to their 100 million customers. What for indie production, what they seem to be implying is, we'll buy, if we like you, actually... we need to really like you, we'll buy you out and you have no access to our market. We'll just give you your production plus 30%. Something like that. Now, there's no, depending on how strong you are. Now, what also the article said, I think it was Stephen Fellowes' article, he says, they've got 3 headings. More than likely, you have to already have your customers already packaged into it. So what they're finding is people are packaging YouTube stars or influencers or something that might have 10 or 20 million followers that Netflix are hoping to convert 1% of that 20 million will give them a 10 euro revenue per month of that conversion rate. That's what you're meant to be pitching to them if you're an unknown indie something. So they're not going for, I made it. There's a queue of 200 people in there with strength of customer base before you, and they don't take everything. And that's where the market is being disempowered in indie production. You'll find it's going to be difficult to raise the money, but even when you do, and even when you've spent it, you've no access to any of the platforms, and the aggregators themselves are having difficulty raising anything or making money.
Actually, it's a really good point to sort of end on. But one of the things I think we're actually getting fairly close to the end of the show, so we do have to come to an end at some point.
You've achieved everything, which is unbelievable.
Yeah, and I think that's the key. That's what's the really important part of the show is the fact that you have managed to find an investor. You've been honest about the way that the film is more than likely not going to generate the revenue, and the investor has been happy to put the money there. You've also not taken on the burden of doing everything, which I think is fantastic, because that's one of the indie filmmakers' downfall, is they tend to take everything on. And you've found this family of people to help you, as in professionals within the film industry that you've worked with, which also means that because the experiences they're having on the shoots that you're doing, they will more than likely come on the next shoot because they know they're going to have the same enjoyment. And as you've also discussed, that on the bigger films, quite often the people feel as though they're insignificant and not part of a family, which also demonstrates that quite often those that do generate an income from the bigger films love coming down to work on the smaller budget films because they feel as though they can have a bit of an impact on the way that film is made and be more creative. And that's a brilliant thing to hear from our perspective. So I think that's my kind of wrap up. But just to wrap up, what would you like to say to the audience, James, to either motivate people forward or consider things that might put their films at risk not to do, just to get, be more positive about the process?
I think, there's a lot of people who sort of, kind of give advice and sort of always say, just go out there and just
do it,
push as hard as possible. And I think that is good advice to a degree, but there's definitely wrong ways to sort of approach doing that. But I know from my own personal experience, you have to have total belief in your idea, in what you're selling. And you can have creative, belief in it, in a project, and you can have commercial belief. And really, you need to have both. And I think that's really important. And it maybe if you're not feeling that, then maybe it's not the right project. I don't know. Something I always sort of think is I like a degree of trepidation before I go into something. If I'm not feeling it, then I know it's not right for me, that I'm not pushing myself to sort of achieve something. And I felt it on this. It was hugely exciting, and it was an amazing experience. Like and I'd sort of prepared myself for, a difficult journey, because you sort of hear horror stories about people making micro-budget films and the stuff they had to deal with, and, and they find themselves halfway through the shoot trying to remortgage their house or something to try and keep the film going. And actually, this experience was spot on. Like, it was good people. We I hate to sort of speak on their behalf, but I feel pretty confident in saying that pretty much everyone had a really fantastic time on the film. We didn't take anyone's work for granted. People, were paid and fed well, which is also probably one of the biggest. Yes. We had really good catering somehow on a micro budget film, and it was a really good, rewarding experience. And it's not over, Yeah. Shooting the film is one. Financing, you that's great. You get your film financed, but then you still have to make the thing, and you have to edit it, and then you have to sell it, and then you have to get an audience to actually watch it. It's just one part of the journey. I'm still on that journey. We've done our festival run. We're sort of winding down on that now, and it's the next stage is to get those deals and start recouping the budget. So, I'm still on that journey, but I'm enjoying it so far.
Brilliant. Absolutely fantastic. Garvin, any last words you'd like to just say just before we say goodbye?
I'm going to just come back in again and go, I wasn't being negative then. I was trying to say, James, you achieved the impossible. And it's brilliant because you raised the finance, you attracted the investor, he knew the risk, you're going and you were then able to do those other parts you said. Everyone knew what you were up to. You had a dream team. You've got the family dream team that were bought in, that over-delivered because you had that family common goal set. They got their pay, their day rate. They got well fed. You had a great time. It's evidence in the movie. There's extra value in there. You attracted beyond the budget. And therefore, by definition, you're one of the few high-value indie productions in the market, and therefore, by definition, you'll get more than get your money back because you're not competing with anybody in that area. You're number one. You've done it. You've gone beyond the ask. For us to try and raise 100 grand without going through the language of what I was trying to say, I couldn't come up with the figures that would prove anyone to give me the money. But I do believe the story, if it was done and you had the money, would deliver it back. But that's a difficult part for an accountant and an investor to understand. What's the risk? How do I get my money back? I don't not believe you can make the film, and it wouldn't be great. I just don't know what it is I'm invested in. Is to attract that unknown investor into the business of film. But I think you've done it, and because you've done it once, you will do it again, and that's brilliant. It's already sold in my books, so I didn't want to be negative on the end.
I didn't know you were negative. I didn't even pick up on that.
George will tell me afterwards. You told him how he's not going to have 2 million customers and he's not going to make any money.
I do remember you saying that now. Well, we probably won't get 2 million, but 3 million maybe. I don't.
There you go. That's what you want. You've made 300% return is what that investor can now expect. I'll send them the email. Yeah.
But that's not guaranteed, folks. If you listen to this, especially if it's not guaranteed. Anyway, listen, that's been a brilliant show. We've learned a lot from our experience of talking to James today, and I think that's fantastic. There's a lot of things that I know other filmmakers can learn from what we've been talking about today, especially not taking on board everything, defining your own roles, working with a family of professional filmmakers that you trust and can work with, getting your pre-production done properly well before you go out and shoot. And also, I think, make sure you got the funding to cover the cost of the whole production before you go out and do the shoot, so you know that you can complete it. And I think it's also exciting to hear what James has been doing about going on the festival route, and then he's motivated about, as the producer, to make sure that he does get a return back on his investor. So thanks, James, for coming onto the show today. Thanks, Garvin, for your input as well. And thanks, everybody, for watching this show, which goes out on a Friday. And we hope you look forward to our next episode. So bye for now.
Cheers.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
Bye.
Hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe and click on the bell for notifications.